Jake Paul pulls the upset, or I guess the favorite, but he shocks the world and beats Tyron Woodley. Let's talk about it. All right, ladies and gents, we are back to talk about the fight this weekend. I was posting quite a bit about it. Now, will I eat crow? I guess we'll find out in just a minute. So, let's talk about what this fight was, what this fight wasn't, and what these guys did. A lot of people coming in. The question was, is Jake a real fighter? We haven't really seen him be tested at all. What would happen if he's tested? And can Tyron box? Is he just an MMA guy or can he actually fight? So let's start it off by looking at what both guys did well and what they could improve on, or, what they didn't do well. Right. So let's take Jake first, for example. I thought he did well, obviously, by winning the fight, right? He won. So he did well in that. But there was certain combinations that he put together. He landed big shots. I think the best thing that he has is he's got a solid right hand, and he's actually has a solid left hand too, in the sense that he has a quick hook, he has a check hook, he can throw it moving backwards, and he has solid timing. That's one of the biggest things that when it comes to seeing, okay, is this guy legit or not? He's got good timing on his shots. It's one of his counters. He's able to boom, throw that left hook as a counter. He's able to throw that right hand over the top. Now, obviously, he needs a little bit more work and experience, but those were pretty good. Now, what he didn't do well was obviously his cardio started going out in the third round. He started huffing and puffing. You saw it. He started breathing out of his mouth. His footwork was not good at all. His footwork was actually quite poor. He was on his bike the whole night, but the footwork wasn't really good. Now, Tyron, on the other hand, and here's the thing. Shout out to Jake for going the 8 rounds, though. You know what I mean? He didn't just completely gas, and he held himself together. He was composed enough when he got hurt and rocked and didn't just fold. So big shout out to him. That was definitely the biggest thing that won him the fight. Tyron, on the other hand, we've had some debates throughout the comments and whatnot on whether or not this guy can actually box. And the thing is I think the answer is yes. I thought he didn't look bad boxing. The thing is, he just didn't box. He didn't fight. You know what I'm saying? So let's see, what did he do good? His timing was good. I had a feeling it would be good. When he would lead with that right hand. He threw a couple solid jabs. There was one jab in particular that he hurt Jake with to the body. And I think it was in like the 7th round. He hit him, boom, right in the sternum. And for the casual eye, you look at it, you don't really notice it. But Jake, you could tell he was kind of like, oh. And then the story of the fight was Tyron just didn't capitalize on anything. He had so many opportunities and didn't capitalize on a single one. It's quite frustrating, but if you've been watching Tyron for the past 5 fights, it's nothing new. It's the same thing every single time. So that was the biggest thing for Tyron, but obviously he landed that big punch in the 4th round. Some debate on whether or not that should have been considered a knockdown. Technically, it really should have, because the ropes held him up. But even if it was, it only would have affected the scorecards in 1 point, and that would not have been enough to sway it over into Tyron's favor on the split decision. Now, also, I think the split decision was quite generous for Tyron as well. I think he won 2 rounds decisively for sure. At least 1 round, like, decisively. I think the last round he won as well. And then there was maybe some other rounds you can give him. The judging is always the biggest thing in boxing, but he just didn't do enough, man. It was frustrating to see somebody who, when you look at the two of them, who's the better fighter? The better fighter and the better boxer that night was Tyron. And here's why. Tyron had cleaner, at least shots coming out, I thought. I mean, Jake had clean shots too, so maybe that's a toss up. Maybe actually it leans a little more Jake. I don't know. There's a solid argument there. There's a debate to be made, to be had about who had the cleaner shots, the better shots, who could throw the better shots. Jake was a little bit sloppy in the combinations. He was like throwing uppercuts and it just kind of wasn't as smooth. But again, he's, I guess, considered, more of a novice professional. So that's going to take time to develop. Again, shout out to him for taking this type of fight. Big step up in competition. But Tyron was the one controlling the distance. His distance control was great. His cardio control, the way he used his energy, I mean, it's easy to say, right? Because he didn't throw nothing. So there was no energy to even outputted for him to have controlled it. But at first, and I even posted on Instagram, I was like, oh, he's patient, he's just waiting. But then he just kept waiting. But yeah, I think out of the two of them, Tyron did have the tools. He just didn't do it. It's as if, he lost the fight on his own. Had he actually tried to win and actually fought through his hands, if you look at all the comments, they were saying, oh, this guy, I wish I could take his arms and throw his hands for him. He just wasn't throwing his hands. It was almost worse. I don't know. You guys tell me what was worse. Nate Diaz hitting Rocky Edwards in the last minute and then just pointing at him and laughing. Ha! Or this guy, Tyron, who hurts the guy, rocks the guy, gets the guy against the ropes, and then doesn't throw punches. And then afterwards he goes and says, first of all, watching him not throw punches is super frustrating. So it's already one of those situations where, like, it's hard to root for him. But then in the post fight where he's like, oh, let's run it back. I'll beat you if we run it back. Bro, you just had the opportunity. It's like you just had the opportunity that should have never happened. Lightning don't strike twice. You're not going to get that chance again. This was your chance. For you to go out there and box against this guy who's trolling you, disrespected your mom, all this stuff, and you still can't throw your hands, and we're supposed to sit back and believe, okay, yeah, if you do it again, you're going to actually go throw your hands. It's your fault. Like I was saying, I think he had the tools to do it. It's as if you had two identical properties, right? Both of them needed a roof replacement. Jake, you go do this one. Tyron, you go do this one. We'll see who has the better, skills, who can get the job done better. And it's like Tyron had all the tools. He had the ability, because that was the biggest thing that was kind of debated, right? Does he have the tools? Can he throw the punches? And does he have the knowledge? Does he know how to throw the punches? Does he know how to box? I thought he had both of them, but it's just he didn't do the job. And then you look at Jake, who, did a solid job, mediocre, definitely needs improvement, but the job got done, at least. He did what he had to do. So you look at one, you look at the other. Anthony says, I will only believe in Jake until he fight a real boxer. Yeah, that makes sense. But here's the thing. When we talk about a real boxer, what's a real boxer? Is that somebody who's a professional? You know what I mean? Because if you look at a lot of these professionals out here, the first couple fights, you're fighting straight up nobodies, cab drivers, as they call them, Uber drivers. You look at a lot of people's, a lot of boxers' resume, their first couple fights, and this is no disrespect on any of them, but their first couple fights are against, journeymen, tough dudes, but against guys. When you take those people that they fight against the resume of Tyron Woodley is up here compared to the guys that those dudes are fighting. So if we have Jake Paul fight another 4-0 boxer, but that 4-0 boxer only fought bums, Yeah, he could have did it for the money, right? Anthony says Woodley lost his last 4 fights. I think he did it for the money for sure. I mean, with that paycheck, but at some point, somebody's disrespecting your mom, this kind of stuff. It's like, hey, they're trolling you. Not only that, but I mean, it's one thing if you lose to Vicente Luque, you lose to Gilbert Burns, you lose to Colby Covington was even bad. But Kamaru Usman, okay, you can have some respect in that, but you lost to Jake Paul, and it wasn't like you just lost to Jake Paul because you're not the better fighter, right? I thought he was the better fighter, and he just didn't throw his hands. Again, he had the tools to do the job, but he took a nap. He sat there the whole time and waited for an opportunity. I think if there's a metaphor in that fight, it's that in life you have opportunities. This was a huge opportunity for him in general, and he had several opportunities in the fight to win, but he sat back, played it safe, didn't capitalize on those opportunities. And then what happens when you don't capitalize on those opportunities? You end up the loser. And that's what happened to him. So now I'm sitting here eating crow because I said that Tyron was going to win. Now, like I said 17 times in a row, I think Tyron was the better fighter. He just didn't fight. Now, we look at what can Jake do in the future, right? Pretty much the only fight. I mean, they're talking about, Nate Diaz, all these guys. None of those fights are going to happen. And the reason none of those fights are going to happen is because they're all under the UFC umbrella. Uncle Dana, Papa Dana's not going to let him out of any of those contracts. So you can forget all about those. None of those are worth it. Nobody's going to nobody's going to see those fights. I mean, maybe Conor McGregor if it's big enough, but even then, I don't think it is. So, yeah. That being said, I think the only available one is Tommy Fury. And that goes into what Anthony just commented, want to see him fight a real boxer. Tommy Fury 7-0 as a boxer. Now he fought a bunch of guys that were, 0-100 or something like that, like crazy records. But you know what I mean? He's at least 7-0. He's the little brother to Tyson. Now, do I think that fight, Jake Paul versus Rampage Jackson? Anthony Price says, "What about Jake Paul versus Rampage Jackson?" I think Rampage Jackson is going to fight Shannon the Cannon Briggs. So we'll see if he can get past Shannon the Cannon, but I don't think he's going to get past Shannon the Cannon, to be honest with you, especially in boxing. But apparently they're supposed to do a 2-fight deal where they fight in boxing and then they fight in MMA. I think they're working out that contract right now, but I think Shannon the Cannon is going to tear him up. But even then, that's not a, you know what I mean? That's I think him versus Tyron is a better fight because Rampage, it's the same thing. He's a MMA guy, and now is retired. His last fight against Fedor, he was fat. He was so fat and got knocked out. So that's not even a fight that's even worth it. I mean, Rampage will hype it up, talk a lot, but I think now the criticisms before were like, okay, let's see him fight somebody legit. Let's see him fight a real fighter. He fought a real fighter. But now then it falls back on, oh, well, we need to see him fight a real boxer, right? Okay. So now he'll fight a 7-0 guy against Tommy Fury. And then this is the biggest fight that's a possibility in the same realm because Tommy Fury has a lot of clout from Love Island. The guy has over 3 million followers. And if Jake is smart, he said, "Oh, I'm going to take a break right now." I think what he wants to do is let the Tyson Fury fight play out and then let the Anthony Joshua fight play out. And then if those two, Fury and Joshua, end up clashing in that undisputed, this guy, Jake Paul, can just boom, insert himself in there and just leech out that hype. He'll somehow find his way to be part of the stories. People will write stories, just like with the Connor versus Poirier. Jake Paul's in the headlines because he's making his chain and whatnot. This kid is good at leeching himself into whatever story is in there. So You know what I mean? If he can do that and somehow use that hype of Tyson Fury and build up Tommy Fury versus him, attach it to that, and then have that fight, I think that's the best move for him. It legitimizes himself as a boxer, and Tommy Fury's performance wasn't too impressive either. I think Tommy definitely has a lot of holes in his game. I think his combinations need to be a little bit smoother, kind of like Jake's. They weren't as smooth as they could have been. But again, all the respect to them. They're going out there doing it. The Probably the worst thing I would say for Tommy was him. He kept loading up that uppercut. He kept like dipping into it, really telegraphing that uppercut. But at the end of the day, my pre-fight prediction was that Tyron was going to win and Tyron was going to knock him out. But I had also mentioned it depends on if Tyron shows up because the last 4 fights, he didn't show up. Well, he didn't show up for 3 of them. One of them he did, and he ended up getting caught. So, had he shown up, he should have been able to win. He didn't really show up for this fight. Again, didn't show up for this fight. Now, I think he's the better fighter. Didn't show up. What can you do about it? That being said, at the end of the day, it goes down in the history books as Jake Paul victory, split decision over Tyron Woodley. I'm eating crow right now. I shouldn't have put my faith in Tyron considering his track record of, not fighting in a fight. But you'd like to hope, right? Especially when you have the abilities, but you can't fight for him. That being said, we'll see what happens. Do you guys think what do you guys think about the fight? Do you think that Tommy Fury is going to be the next fight? And if not, who do you think will be the next fight? You let me know, and then we will find out next time.